Hey everybody, Aaron Rift here from NoDQ.com to talk about the greatest career highlights of Steve Austin. Steve Austin is arguably the biggest star in the history of the wrestling business, right up there with Hulk Hogan and The Rock, and possibly the biggest drawing superstar of all time in terms of how much money he made for WWE over the years. He's had so many memorable moments. The first one that I think really put him on the map was when he teamed up with Brian Pillman in WCW, and they were the Hollywood Blondes. That's the first time you really saw the superstar character of Steve Austin. He was a guy who came into the wrestling business, got very good very quick, but you really got to see his character when he went out there with Brian Pillman. You got to see that charisma and personality. And in particular, I remember the segment with him and Pillman doing a parody of the Four Horsemen. I thought that was really funny. And at that point, I think a lot of people took notice to Austin and saw him as a potential major superstar. But then, of course, WCW fired him and let him go. So there you go. And Austin was really frustrated. And he went to ECW, and he cut this really awesome promo where he was dressed up as Eric Bischoff, and he just completely blasted WCW and Hulk Hogan and Monday NyQuil. And it was great. And this segment, I'm sure, definitely caught the attention of Vince McMahon in the WWE. And it was only a matter of time before he ended up in WWE. And he came in. He was the ringmaster. This was Vince McMahon's vision for Steve Austin. Wasn't working. Austin was able to change his name to Stone Cold Steve Austin, and he ended up winning the King of the Ring. WWE still had high hopes for him. They thought he had the potential to be a major superstar. Austin won the King of the Ring, and then he cut that infamous promo, the Austin 316 promo, where he ripped into Jake Roberts for being the Bible thumper and said that Austin 316 says, "I just whipped your ass." And the crowd popped huge for it. And this was a time when profanity was rarely used on television. And when Austin did it, it was groundbreaking and it was extremely edgy. And we started seeing Steve Austin more and more doing crazy antics and pushing the envelope. And one segment that really sticks out was when he invaded Brian Pillman's house. He showed up at Brian Pillman's house, beat up his friends, and Brian Pillman ended up pulling the gun on Steve Austin. I mean, this was really one of the first times in Raw history where it really felt like things were out of control. And, this was one of the most memorable segments of that year in WWE. And then Austin would go on to win the 1997 Royal Rumble. And, this feud with Bret Hart was just tremendous. Steve Austin was getting under the skin of Bret Hart, and it all led up to WrestleMania 13. In my opinion, the single greatest professional wrestling match of all time. My favorite story, where you had a double turn. You had Bret Hart turn heel. He put the sharpshooter on Steve Austin. Austin was a bloody mess, and he refused to quit. He would not quit. And that made Steve Austin a babyface in that instant. And then Bret Hart, like a good heel, kicked him while he was down. Perfect storytelling here. And, a moment you'll never forget. One of the most played clips in WWE history, Steve Austin with his face and all the blood coming down. And then the feud continued. And one of the most memorable segments in Raw history, period, was the street fight between Bret Hart and Steve Austin. And Steve Austin beat the crap out of Bret Hart. Bret Hart was having surgery in real life, so this was a way to write him off television for a few weeks. And Austin beat the crap out of him. Bret Hart was taken out in an ambulance, and just as the ambulance was about to drive away, Steve Austin was in the driver's seat, and he continued pounding on Bret Hart, and Gorilla Monsoon was pissed off. He's like, "You're out of control," and Austin was like, "You're damn right." And this was just great television. I mean, this was a period when people stopped watching WCW or were starting to pay more attention to WWE. They weren't quite done with WCW yet. But people were starting to take more notice to what was going on Raw with this segment. And a couple months later, Steve Austin went on this stunner rampage. First, he stunned Sergeant Slaughter and then it was Jim Ross, and then Jerry Lawler, and then finally he gave Vince McMahon, the boss of WWE, the Stone Cold Stunner in Madison Square Garden. Classic moment. And this was really when Steve Austin was exploding in popularity. He ended up winning the 1998 Royal Rumble, and the next night on Raw, he had that confrontation with Mike Tyson. And, up to this point, the WWE fans were really into Steve Austin, but now it was time for the rest of the world to get to know Steve Austin. And that's what happened here in this confrontation with Mike Tyson. In my opinion, the greatest Raw moment of all time, because not only was it memorable and you had all this chaos, but it did so much to help WWE and their business. And I think that if there's any one segment that gave WWE more viewers, it was this one, because you had all the mainstream publicity with Mike Tyson, and all these people were tuning in to Raw, and they saw this Steve Austin character, and they were hooked on the product. And then Steve Austin went on to win the WWE title at WrestleMania 14. The Austin era had begun, as JR put it, and the feud with Vince McMahon began. And we had some classic segments, so many memorable moments between Austin and McMahon. The ones that stick out the most to me, first off, was the Zamboni. Steve Austin came out. Vince McMahon was in the ring presenting the new WWE Championship. Austin jumped up on the Zamboni, dove over all the security guards onto Vince. The crowd was going crazy. And, it was just classic Austin McMahon. And the McMahon was yelling backstage, "Take his ass to jail. You go to jail, you son of a bitch." And, Vince was at the top of his game as well. And then the week after that, Steve Austin attacked Vince in the hospital. Undertaker and Kane beat up Vince after that Zamboni segment. And Vince was in the hospital. Steve Austin came out, hit him with the bedpan, and just one of the funniest moments ever in WWE, seeing Vince getting beat up by Austin, and he's in his underwear too. So I mean, just goes to show that Vince would do anything to entertain the people. But Austin was at the top of the game here, no doubt. And then the cement truck. Vince had his new Corvette. Austin came out with the cement truck and poured the cement into the car, and it was just more classic Austin McMahon. Austin just giving McMahon more gray hairs. And then one of the most shocking moments, I think, was the McMahon 316, when Steve Austin pulled out a gun on Vince McMahon, and the whole place went silent, not knowing what to make of this. But then, of course, it was a toy gun that said "Bang 316," and Vince had wet his pants. So once again, Vince humiliating himself for the sake of entertainment. And then one more segment, which WWE themselves often referred to as the greatest moment in Raw history. I don't know if I would call it the greatest, but I mean, it's certainly one of the best. When Steve Austin came out in the beer truck and sprayed Vince and the corporate team, The Rock and Shane McMahon, with the beer. I mean, it was just, the peak of the Attitude Era, and the whole place was going crazy for it. And it wasn't just Vince that Austin was targeting. Austin also targeted The Rock. You had the segment where The Rock had his brand new Lincoln car, and Austin destroyed it with the monster truck. And later in 1999, Steve Austin got hurt. He had to have neck surgery. He was gone for almost a full year. And definitely it was a big moment when he made his return at Unforgiven in 2000 and proved to everybody that Stone Cold was just as good as ever. And another career highlight for Steve Austin, well, several highlights, would be his matches with The Rock, his trilogy. First, the match at WrestleMania 15, where he beat The Rock for the title, and then the WrestleMania 17 match. One of the greatest matches of all time, with the controversial finish of Steve Austin turning heel and aligning himself with Vince McMahon, something you thought you would never see, Austin making a deal with the devil or whatever. And then finally, the WrestleMania 19 match, which was Steve Austin's big send-off, his final match. Definitely an emotional match to watch. And, Steve Austin, towards the end of his career, also had some very funny moments. The stuff he did with Kurt Angle with the guitar, them singing songs together backstage, trying to please Vince McMahon. I mean, those were really funny segments. I wasn't a big fan of the Steve Austin heel character, but I found those segments to be the peak of Austin as a heel, and the most entertaining aspect of him being a heel. Those segments were really funny. And him singing with The Rock, them doing the Jimmy Buffett song, and that was just great. And Austin beating up Booker T in the supermarket. This was extremely entertaining. And I actually went to that marketplace. I found it in Bakersfield. I mean, that's how big a fan I was of that segment. I went all the way to Bakersfield to try to find that location. And it was just something really unique and something that was unforgettable. And shortly after this, Steve Austin retired, and that was the end of his career. It didn't go as long as people would have hoped for, but he had a tremendous run. And when he came back after retiring, he became the co-GM with Eric Bischoff, and there were some entertaining moments there. And I remember the redneck triathlon and Eric Bischoff getting the Bronco Buster from Mae Young, or the Stink Face. So, I mean, Steve Austin, had so many entertaining moments, and, quite possibly the greatest superstar in WWE history. So that'll do it for my thoughts. Let me know what you think. What are some moments about Stone Cold Steve Austin that you remember that I did not mention in this video? Leave a comment, youtube.com/NoDQCW, and stay tuned to NoDQ.com for the very latest in WWE and TNA. Thanks for watching.